mean, 100 quiz.
Yeah, 100 quiz grade.
100 quiz grade?
300 quiz grade.
You can't really reward.
100 test grade.
You can't give reward. Grade reward.
What'd you do?
Have not filmed in forever.
Allow myself to.
I haven't remade my, it still says chapter 37. I haven't fixed my thing, but in your book it's chapter 35, okay? We're on 35.1. And this is another chapter I'm just spending 20 minutes on, 30 minutes on.
Did we do 36?
We're doing 35 today.
Oh, and then we're doing 36?
We're doing 36 tomorrow. Are you okay with that?
We're doing a lot
Yeah,
Friday.
I already read part of it.
Fridays, we're going back over some of the lab stuff. And then the test is Monday.
Oh.
I haven't filmed test.
Test is Monday. It's not a surprise because it's on the syllabus.
It is.
What is it? What are we having?
What's that?
Does it have to be on Monday?
Yeah.
Could it be on
Plan that because I'm not going to be here.
So we can't ask you questions?
That's right. You aren't allowed to ask questions anyway. So
So, okay, what's that?
This is a hydra. Hydras don't need a respiratory system. That's what this chapter is about, respiratory system. Hydras don't need one because every cell that they have is near the water.
A hydra?
There are only 2 layers of cells in a hydra. Yeah, it's like a,
Hydra?
it's a cnidarian. It's like a jellyfish almost.
What don't they need?
A respiratory system.
This is on page 665.
What's the deal with the tentacles?
They use that to capture food and sting things. But a respiratory system is for getting oxygen. And every cell on the outer layer of a hydra is near oxygen because the water has oxygen in it. And water goes into the mouth of the hydra here, into the gastrovascular cavity here, and oxygen can go into those cells on the inside. So this is an animal that doesn't need a respiratory system. Small organisms don't need respiratory systems. They can just exchange with the environment. A flatworm is a thin organism, and they're thin enough where they don't need respiratory systems. This picture's not in your book. A bigger organism is a fish, and a fish does need a respiratory system. They're so thick, and they need a protective covering for keeping in water and such. They need a respiratory system. So they have gills, and they have blood running through the gills, and they take water in their mouth, and the water comes out through their gill openings and past these little gill filaments is what we call these things. I know the phone's ringing, I'm ignoring it. And the blood on the gill filaments gets the water, gets the oxygen from the water. So that's a good way, that's the way fish get oxygen. The blood then takes the oxygen to all the cells. Now, fish use a certain type of exchange that is on page 666. Ooh, scary number. It's called counter-current exchange. So let's look at it, page 666. Counter-current exchange works like this. This isn't the exact same picture in your book, but it's basically the same idea. Water is moving one way across the gills. Blood is moving in the opposite direction. We call that counter-current exchange. And there's a reason for it. You can get more oxygen, if you're blood, you can get more oxygen from the water if you're going in the opposite direction that the water's coming.
So like those swimming pools that have.
Well, if you were breathing oxygen, if you were somehow using the water for oxygen, yeah, if you were a fish, that would be helpful. And the reason why is because you encounter more water if you're moving in the opposite direction than if you're moving in the same direction. For instance, if you're driving on the causeway, Stephanie, you get any of this? Yeah? If you're driving on the causeway, do you pass more cars on your own side, or do you pass more cars on the other side?
Other side.
On the other side, you pass way more cars. Or you encounter more cars. Because you're moving in opposite directions. They're coming at you this way, and you'll pass a lot more of them than you would pass going on your side if you were moving in the same direction. Imagine each car being a water, some water, and in the water having oxygen. You would get more oxygen if you're moving in the opposite direction. It's kind of it makes total sense if you think about it that way. And so, the gills of fish have evolved so that the deoxygenated blood comes in here and moves this way in the opposite direction that the water is going through. And so you can get more oxygen that way in the gills and become highly oxygenated. We call that countercurrent exchange. And that's kind of an important thing that they talk about when they're talking about how exchange of gases works in organisms. Here we go. The water's going in this direction, and the blood is going in that direction. And the blood gets a very high percentage of oxygen because it's going in the opposite direction. This is a grasshopper, and grasshoppers don't breathe through their nose. Did you know that? They have little air sacs all along the sides of their bodies. They're each like a little lung that absorbs oxygen, fills up with air. And there are little tubes, little tiny tubules. Here they show them here. They're called tracheoles that the air can go through, and every cell is near a tracheole. So it's a giant system of tubes that holds air, of sacs that hold air, and tubes that deliver air to every cell.
So the tracheoles deliver the air to the air sacs?
The tracheoles deliver the air to the cells.
Okay. From the air sacs?
From the air sacs. The spiracles take in the air from the outside. Those little holes are called spiracles. So how do you drown a plug like this? What do you do?
Stick the whole thing in the water?
Yeah, you'd have to cover up all these holes. That's how you suffocate it, I should have said, not drown. The only way to suffocate a grasshopper is to stop up all the holes, which is hard to do. So they have a different sense. We just take in air through one hole. They take in air through a bunch of holes. Yeah?
If you stuck a grasshopper in water, would it be able to hold its breath?
It would for a while because the air sac can hold air.
I mean, can it control to close up, or do they close themselves?
The spiracles?
Yeah.
I think they can close. They have little muscles on the side that can open and close the spiracles. So it could hold its breath for a while. Lungs evolved in amphibians, and amphibians breathe air into lungs, and then the blood goes to the lung to get the oxygen and then delivers it to the cells. That's how we do it too. Amphibians at first had kind of weak lungs, so amphibians have thin skin, and amphibians also take in oxygen through their skin. But when amphibians evolved into reptiles, the reptiles have thicker skin, so they can keep water in their body and survive far away from water. So the lungs got even bigger. And they no longer had to breathe through their skin. So reptiles and birds and mammals all have a system of lungs. And don't even breathe through their skin. Birds have the coolest, the best respiratory system of all. They not only have lungs, they have lots of air sacs in their body to hold oxygen. When a bird breathes in, it fills its lungs and it fills all these air sacs. And when it breathes out, the lung empties, and then the air sacs move air into the lungs. So that there's a constant supply of air in the lungs. There's a constant supply of fresh air.
Now, how did it evolve like that? But we didn't.
Because birds need more oxygen than we do because they have to fly. So, birds evolved from reptiles just like mammals evolved from reptiles. But birds are even more active. So they had to have a better way of getting oxygen. And so they not only evolved lungs, but kind of side lungs to that lung.
So when
To get even more air in their bodies.
So when they breathe in, they're really filling the air sacs?
They fill the air sacs and the lungs, yeah.
But if they breathe out and the air goes into the lungs,
Then there's some air that never gets out, isn't there? A little bit, yeah.
That's what happens when we breathe out.
Whoa, that was too many at once. Either one, I don't care.
What happens when they breathe out?
When they breathe out, they expel air from their lungs, but the lung is then filled by air from the air sacs, so that there's always a fresh supply of air in the lungs. That's different than us. We breathe in air, and there's air in our lungs. Then we breathe out, and for a while, there's no air in our lungs. Bird gets more air than we do, twice as much.
Would it be possible to medically put like an air sac in the human body?
I don't know. There might not be room.
We'll take out the appendix.
Okay. Sounds like an operation.
With the lungs, when you breathe out, you're breathing out carbon. The oxygen gets turned into carbon dioxide and comes into your lungs, and you just breathe out that carbon dioxide, right?
Yes. Well, oxygen comes in. And it's taken by the blood to the cells. The blood picks up carbon dioxide that was made in the mitochondria of the cells and delivers it to the lungs and drops it off.
And it does it that fast, so if you breathe
Yeah, well, the blood's constantly moving, so it's constantly delivering carbon dioxide. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So it's not transferring air, it's transferring carbon dioxide.
Well, the air has oxygen in it, so air gets oxygen in, and then the CO2 is dropped off by the blood, so the CO2 comes out. Who was asking that?
Me.
Who's me? Emery? Did that answer your question?
Mm-hmm.
So here's how our system works, if you're interested in us, which a lot of people are. We spend a lot more time on this in anatomy, so if you want to take anatomy and learn more about how it works. You have your mouth, your nasal cavity and oral cavity both connect in the back. The back of the throat is called the pharynx. And you can breathe in through your nose or your mouth.
is it mouth, nasal cavity, and throat?
There's a nasal cavity there, and there's the oral cavity, and there's the pharynx. And you can breathe in and take in oxygen, and it goes down here, and it goes down, the oxygen goes down this way, and through the trachea, this part's called the trachea. This part right here is called the larynx. That's your voice box. And that's where your vocal cords are that vibrate when you talk. And if you notice the trachea here, that's your windpipe, is surrounded by cartilage. That's the white things there. And they hold the trachea open. So this tube is always open. It never closes in your lifetime. If it closes, you couldn't breathe. And then it branches off. You see how branches go here? It branches to one side and the other. These are the bronchi. That's a bronchus. That's a bronchus. Together we call them bronchi.
So it branches off to the bronchi?
Yeah, the trachea branches off to the bronchi. And then the bronchi get even smaller, and we call these little tiny branches bronchioles. Have you ever heard of bronchitis? That's an infection you can have in your bronchi. If you get bacteria that are living and growing down there, that's not good. They're eating up your bronchioles, and you get real bad cough, and it's not good.
That's why you cough up blood, because they're eating.
Yeah, you could. They're eating the walls of your.
So the air
So
So
you're
you're
working
actually
out of the
bleeding in your
bronchioles?
lungs, kind of.
Yeah, what's that?
The air just comes out of the bronchioles.
The air comes in, and it spreads all through these little branches. I'm going to show you what's at the ends of the branches in just a second. This is the diaphragm. That's your breathing muscle. To breathe in, you contract the diaphragm, and it moves down. And that causes the breath to come in. To breathe out, you relax the diaphragm, and it goes back up.
So that's why if you get.
That's why you breathe, is you're moving your diaphragm. Your brain is telling your diaphragm, okay, go down. Okay, relax. Okay, go down. Okay, relax. Okay, go down. And it does that your whole life. What were you going to say?
I was just wondering, that's why if you like, I don't know if you get hit really hard in the stomach or something like that.
Yeah. It paralyzes the diaphragm briefly. And you get the wind knocked out of you. And you can't breathe, you're going, they're going, what's wrong? And you go, ah. Come on, get up. And then finally it comes back. If it never came back, that would be the end, wouldn't it? Yes.
Are we subconsciously telling ourselves to breathe?
Yeah, there's a part of your brain
Involuntary
called the
reflex.
medulla oblongata and the pons that control your breathing. And it does it without you having to think. It's part of what you call your brain stem. And your brain stem acts without conscious thought.
Am I back here?
And it's kind of in the middle, in the very middle. I can't
But
really.
you can't
So,
control your breathing anyway.
What are all the involuntary reflexes? Blinking, breathing,
Heart rate, blood pressure, body temperature,
those things-
hormone release,
stuff that you can't control.
hunger, thirst, fear. There's all sorts of things.
But you can control your breathing. Right?
You can control your breathing consciously, but it's also subconsciously controlled. So there's two areas of the brain controlling it. It's double wired. Hey, those are your vocal cords. That's what it looks like. They snaked a camera down somebody's throat. Those are the vocal cords.
That's what vibrates.
That's what vibrates to produce sound.
And to the left and right, that's where the tonsil should be, maybe?
No, this is all cartilage that helps.
Yeah.
Are we packing up for some reason? Let's not do that. There's a man cut in half.
Really? A real guy?
Yeah.
Cadaver, right?
They take a cadaver, which is usually like some homeless guy or something, or somebody that donated their body to science, and they freeze them,
And cut them in half.
and they cut them in half with a big saw, and medical students study it, and you can see there's the mouth, and there's the nasal cavity, and there's the windpipe right there.
So it's like,
Do you get any money for donating? Wait, it's donating.
is that our
I don't
spine?
think so. What's that?
Is that the spine?
This right here, yeah.
Your spine starts all the way.
No, I don't know what that is.
The spine
Yeah, I
is
guess that
body
is.
science.
That is,
Your
yes.
spine starts like in the big mouth.
Yeah.
We're scientists, we just hire people to find bodies for them.
Look, here's somebody cut sideways, cross section.
Wow.
You can see, look how big the lungs are. They're real wide. See, that's his chest hair. You can see his chest hair up
What's
there.
wrong
Ew,
with
oh my gosh, that's
See how wide the lungs are?
Wait,
Why is there a big space there?
Yes, sir.
He was a smoker. There's the heart.
I said cancer, but maybe it's.
Yeah, he was a smoker and could have had cancer, and that's what happens. Your lungs reduce in size and they die.
Have you seen the body
They
exhibit?
disappear.
The body equal? Have you seen
Yeah,
that?
I have. It's awesome.
I saw
They
that.
show you
really that
There's a lung hanging
It's
there.
like-
Okay, hold on. I gotta finish this. Listen. This is at the end of those bronchioles. At the end of each bronchiole, there's a little bubble that holds the air. It's called an alveolus. Are y'all with me? It seems like a lot of y'all don't care about this. Alveoli are these little bubbles, and they hold oxygen. And you can see each one of them is surrounded by blood vessels.
What's it called?
It's an alveolus. Alveoli plural. They're the little bubbles at the end of the bronchioles. So the air comes in, it goes through these passageways, it enters these little bubbles. And the bubbles are like balloons. They fill up with air. And the walls are so thin that the oxygen can diffuse right through the walls. See those thin walls there? The oxygen can diffuse right through them into the blood. And the blood turns red because the blood carries iron. And when iron and oxygen react together, it forms iron oxide, which is a red color. Rust is red. It's also iron oxide.
Pressure lungs pressurized.
So you're.
So then the blood comes in through this vessel. It's called the pulmonary artery. We'll learn that next chapter. No, we already learned that. The blood comes in through the pulmonary artery. It's blue because it doesn't have any oxygen. Then it comes out. It turns red when the oxygen diffuses in, and then leaves the lung. This happens very rapidly. The blood is only in the lung for about a second. Yeah.
You say blood is in the lungs?
Yeah, look here. This is the end of the bronchioles. These are the little bubbles.
Air.
This is in the lungs.
And it's the alveoli.
Alveoli. You see these? These are blood vessels.
Yeah.
So the blood comes in, gets oxygen. That's what happens in the lungs.
So if you hold your breath for a really long time, what's actually happening is the blood's coming in, it's not picking up as much oxygen.
That's right.
So that's why your head starts there, because you're getting less oxygen.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yes.
Don't the alveoli like break when you smoke?
Yeah, smoking. And the last section of this reading talks about lung diseases, and I'm not going to get to it, but you can read about it. But when you smoke, what happens is the tar from the smoke lines these alveoli, and then they crack, and they die, and the white blood cells come in and clean it up. And it's basically like if you ever took a balloon that you blow up and painted the outside of it, it would crack when you tried to blow it up. That's exactly what happens to the alveoli in your lungs if you're a smoker. And so you greatly reduce the amount of alveoli by smoking. And it can also cause cancer and such. Smoking's your lungs are very delicate because these membranes have to be thin to let oxygen pass. Your lungs are probably the most delicate organ in your body. And there's a lot of blood in there. So to mess with that organ by smoking is just a big mistake. And unfortunately it's addictive, so people can't stop doing it. But if you're if you're going to do your drugs, you shouldn't do it by smoking. That's probably the worst way to do your drugs.
So share your needles.
Yeah, that's probably not a good idea. The best thing is not to do the drugs. But it would be if you had a nicotine addiction, it would be better to chew nicotine gum than to smoke. And that's why a lot of people do that instead. Because at least you're not damaging those precious lungs.
You get a bunch of caries in your teeth.
Now I got a question. If
Yes.
you're getting oxygen and your blood contains iron in it, and it's iron oxide, why is it bad for you to get it cut by something rusty if you've already got iron?
Because there are bacteria in the rusty nail. And the bacteria get in you.
Oh, so it's the kind of bacteria that's.
Yeah, but there are bacteria that live in metal that are really, really harmful. And all rusty nails have a lot of those bacteria in it.
And
So you get the bacteria in you, that's what kills you, not the rust.
So the bacteria in the metal, they are able to eat metal, right? 'Cause that's what rust does, it's eroding metal. Right?
I don't know if they eat metal, but that's where they live.
Why do they live there?
And what can you get?
I don't know.
Meningitis from it?
Tetanus.
Sorry.
There's lots of bad stuff. Lots of infections.
Just don't get cut by it.
Gangrene.
You
We once convinced my soccer coach that a girl
From any
needs to
kind of
get
cut
gangrene.
that's an open wound.
It doesn't really have to be rusty. I mean, as long as it's
Yeah.
a puncture wound.
Puncture,
like a
yeah.
nail,
Isn't gangrene when your
tetanus.
liver shut down?
No.
No, it's when a bacteria is kind of eating up your body and
And
it
what's
turns.
when you turn yellow?
That's jaundice.
Jaundice.
Oh, jaundice.
Yeah.
We convinced my soccer coach on that.
If you're interested in diseases, there's a whole section on it in the end here.